In this segment, we're going to discuss the basic architecture and the requirements of hardware for Kafka. So the architecture, remember, brokers run on individual machines in a cluster. So you'd have a Kafka cluster composed of multiple Kafka brokers, each broker running on its own machine. And this could be physical or a virtual machine. It really is going to depend upon the load that you put on it and what your performance needs are and really what your data volumes are. So the hardware should be tuned to the job of reading, writing. And it's really going to depend on how much data you're producing, how long your retention is of that data, and how fast you're reading the data. So you're going to have to take into consideration these various aspects as you go to set up the hardware you're going to use for Kafka. Memory is also a concern. So the memory in the OS is going to buffer reads and writes to disk. So that's going to be important because remember, Kafka is using a write-ahead log. So it's going to be writing that data to disk. It's going to get flushed. You're going to need the OS to cache some of that with memory buffers. And you're reading. So you have consumers that are reading data as fast as you can. Again, you're going to want that OS level caching. So you're going to make sure you have ample amount of memory on your brokers. You could estimate the memory by multiplying the time by throughput. So for example, if you're going to be sending 100 megabytes of data a second for 100 seconds, then you need 10 gigabytes available for buffers alone. Disks are also going to be important. The speed's important. So the bandwidth and the IOPS are things you're going to want to look at. Remember, Kafka is going to be writing all the data you send is going to reach disk, and you're going to be reading that data, and it's going to be coming off a disk as you're reading it. So this probably won't be a surprise, but more disks are going to be better. Right? You're going to be able to have that parallelization of reading and have more parallel throughput. You may look at things like serial attached SCSI or SSD. Those may be better depending upon the flush behavior and what your requirements are. The OS you choose, you really have a bunch of options here. Kafka runs on Linux, Solaris, pretty much any flavor of Unix you may want to run it on. It's not very well supported on Windows at this time, and I'm not sure how many of you may be using that as a deployment environment. But if you have access to any Linux or Solaris distribution, you should run just fine there. Another thing you're going to need to consider is the network and the JVM. Again, you have a cluster of machines that are going to be communicating. Remember, we have leaders and followers of these topics, and things are getting replicated. We have producers sending messages as fast as they can. You have consumers reading messages as fast as they can. So there's a lot of data that's moving around. So you're going to want a pretty fast and stable network. Okay, something that's data center quality. 1 or 10 gigabit. From a JVM standpoint, using Java 1.7 or later is recommended, and using the G1 collector. You should be fine using Java 1.8 or any of the later versions of 1.7. This sums up for you the overall hardware architecture and the network JVM and OS that you need to think about with Apache Kafka. So with this, you should have a good understanding of the various aspects and some things to keep in mind.